If you are researching to buy a camera for landscape photography, who you will tune to for reviews? A portrait photographer or a landscape photographer? There are so many reviews about Fuji XT5 on the internet, but there are so little reviews from the perspective of landscape photography. That's what we are going to talk about in this video. I'm going to give you my review about Fuji XT5 or landscape photography in 14 categories. If that's something you are interested in, please continue watching. Hello everyone, my name is Hamed Bank. I'm a landscape and nature photographer based in Sweden. And in this video, we are talking about my camera, Fuji XT5. The first category or the first aspect of the camera is the sensor. Of course, it's the heart of the camera. It has a 40 megapixel APS-C sensor. So 40 megapixel, what does it mean for landscape photography? That means that you get more details, of course. With more details, with more megapixel, that means that you can produce bigger images, and because we landscape photographers love to print our work, you can print bigger. And if you love to print big, this camera can offer a very good detailed big file. But there is a drawback to more megapixel that I will talk about it a little bit later in this video. The other good thing about 40 megapixel is that means that you can crop more easily into the image without losing too much megapixel, and still you will have a big good size image to print or post on social media or your website. I always crop my images. I rarely use 3:2 aspect ratio of the files. Most of the time I crop to 5:4, 5:7 or 16:9 or 1:1. And with those crops you will cut so many pixels out of the image, and because this camera can produce high megapixel, that means that you can easily crop in without be worrying about losing too much details. Sometimes I actually crop even more because I want to improve my composition, so I will do it with a peace of mind. The second category or the second aspect is actually the sensor size, APS-C. Is it good or is it bad for landscape photography? I would say it's a good thing. Well, there is some good and bad about it. I will talk about both. First, the good thing. With the APS-C, you will get more depth of field. For landscape photography, we usually need more depth of field. We want to have everything in focus from very, very close to camera, foreground, all the way into the distance. And with the APS-C camera, it's easier to achieve. You don't have to close down the aperture so much. So you can actually open up your aperture a little bit more than what you would do with the equivalent full frame camera for the same scene, and you actually can gather a little bit more light. Well, there is a debate about that because a smaller sensor can gather less light, but when you open up the aperture a little bit more, you can compensate for that. So there is a balance here that you can achieve. And remember, there is no perfect product in the world. Every product has some pros and some cons. But what about this exact sensor Fujifilm puts in their X-T5 cameras? Well, it's a X-trans sensor. It's a bit different from regular Bayer sensors on other cameras. And if you want to know more about this, the difference between X-trans and Bayer sensors, Paltutech has a very great video about that. I will put the link to his video in the description. But in general, X-trans sensors can produce beautiful colors and beautiful details if they're processed correctly. And that's why I'm using Capture One to process my images. So in terms of landscape photography, because we are dealing with the foliage and small leaves, the small details in the landscape, X-trans sensors can produce very nice images. The next category I want to talk is the user experience of this camera, especially about the knobs and dials you have on this camera. You have a lot of knobs and dials and buttons to work with. You have these three main dials on top of the camera. One is for ISO, one is for shutter speed, and the other one is the exposure compensation. And you can control aperture on the lens. Almost all of the Fuji native lenses, they have this aperture ring on them. And if you have a lens that doesn't have aperture ring, you still have this dial in front of the camera that you can adjust the aperture with that. You can also adjust the shutter speed with the dial on the back of the camera. It gets a little bit of time too used to it, but when you do, there is no going back. I really love the look of the camera, the aesthetic of the camera, and this is a camera I enjoy to work with, I enjoy to use, which helped me actually to go out more often and enjoy my photography out there when I'm out there. But that's not specifically for landscape, right? It's something that fall into your personal preference. But the good thing about the knobs and dials on this camera is that you can customize a lot of them. So you have so many buttons in front, on the back, and on top of the camera that you can customize. And also you can have some shortcut on the touch screen that I'll talk about touch screen in a second. That means I can assign many tasks or many settings to different knobs, different buttons, and adjust my camera without going into the menu system every time. And that helps me because when things happening so fast in landscape, when the light changes quite fast and you have a fleeting moment of light and colors, you don't want to faff around with the menu. You just want to set your camera and it should be ready to use. And you can do that with this camera. To the next point, size and weight. This camera is 557 gram or 1.23 pound, which is not so light, but it's not too heavy either. And it's very perfect size for my taste. That means that you can put it on a smaller and lighter tripod as well, which helps reducing the weight you are carrying with you into the landscape. Because for landscape photographers, weight is very important. We are carrying a lot of gear with us. We are carrying lenses and cameras and drone and tripod and everything with us. That can get very, very heavy quickly. So every gram matters. And because this camera is actually a APS-C camera, then that means that the lenses are available for this system are a little bit smaller and a little bit lighter. So in total, the whole weight of the camera and lenses are much, much less than something like an equivalent full frame camera. Even though there are some great options for full frame with the same size and weight or even lighter than Fuji XT5, but combination of the lenses and the body and other accessories, I think you will save a lot of weight. Only thing about the design and the body is that the grip is not too deep. This is one of the reasons I have put an L bracket from a small rig on the camera. It not only gives me the L bracket, so I can rotate the camera on very easily and quickly from landscape to portrait orientation on my tripod, it also gives me a good and deeper grip. So if you buy this camera, I highly recommend to buy a grip or a cage or something like this L bracket. Now we talked about the lenses. The next category, which is very important for any type of photography, especially for landscape, is the lens choices. Fuji only makes APS-C and medium format cameras, right? Because of that, all the lenses they have designed is designed for this system, for the X system. And that means that they made very, very high quality lenses that are designed for APS-C. That means they are smaller, they are lighter, but they are performing very, very good in pair with any professional lens out there for other systems. Sometimes they are even better than other systems in terms of the performance of the lenses. And of course, it depends on the lens and depends on the focal length and everything else. But in general, Fuji lenses are top-notch quality. There are some great third-party lenses available for X-mount system like Sigma, Viltrox, Samyang, TT Artisan, and etc. So you have a very, very good collection of lenses that you can pick from, and the price of the third-party lenses are usually cheaper compared to native brand lenses. I like to use zoom lenses because I don't like to exchange my lenses all the time and expose my sensor to elements. And of course, it gets easier to reach and create different photographs when you are in the landscape. I have 20 to 24 millimeter f4 from Fuji, 16 to 80 millimeter, which is my main lens right now. If I want to go out with only one lens, that's gonna be 16 to 80 millimeter f4. Then I have 70 to 300 millimeter, and with that 4 lenses, I have covered from 10 millimeter to 300 millimeter on this APS-C sensor, which is equivalent to 15 millimeter to 420 millimeter on a full frame camera, which covers everything I need for landscape. If you want to use this camera for wildlife, there are some other options that will give you more reach. I also have a Viltrox 30mm f1.4, which I use for astro and night photography. Talking about the night photography, how this camera perform in low light, because we landscape photographers, we often shoot in low light situation, sunset, sunrise, in the forest, or even at night. Therefore, low light performance of the camera is very important for us. When we talk about the low light performance, we usually refer to dynamic range and the noise produced by the sensor in low light. Fuji cameras usually produce noises that they are more like a fingering. They are not so ugly, and I found that if you have a good exposure with higher ISO, you can produce clean images without too much noise. I would say with this Fuji XT5 you can easily raise your ISO to 1000, 1250, something like that, and even 1600 if you don't have too much light. With the longer shutter speed you can get away with the noise quite easily. Up to 3200 the image is looking good. 6400 a bit too much noise, and here is one of the drawbacks when we talk about higher megapixel sensors. When you have more megapixel, that means that each individual pixel on the sensor is smaller. Usually that results in more noise in the image, but as I mentioned, noise in Fuji X-T5 is not so bad. I'm not worried about the noise on my images. The only other drawback on 40 megapixel is the file size are getting bigger, noticeably bigger than, let's say, 26 megapixel files I used to have with my X-T4. So that means that you are running out of space and the storage a little bit faster with 40 megapixel. But at the same time, I think 40 megapixel is more future proof. The other practicality of this camera for landscape is the LCD screen on the back of the camera. First of all, it's a 3-axis tilted screen. That means it can be rotated this way or that way. So if you have the camera higher than you look at the screen, if you are put the camera very low, you don't need to crouch on the ground. When you're doing the portrait mode, still you can have a good view on your LCD, and the LCD is very bright and it's a very good touch screen. You can do everything with that. There is no limitation in touch. You can change the menu, you can zoom in, pinching in and out on your images. Also you have some other functions that I will talk a little bit later. If you want to use it for vlog, that's not the screen you should use. This screen is made with the photography in mind. It's one of the reasons I switched from X-T4 to X-T5, because I was a little bit tired of fully articulated screen on X-T4, and I wanted something that doesn't interfere with the bracket. Next category is autofocus on the camera. The autofocus on Fuji cameras are not perfect. The Fuji X-T5 is not an exception. But the issues has been resolved quite a lot with the latest updates on Fuji cameras across the board. What does it mean for me as a landscape photographer? I actually don't care much. I was happy with my autofocus all the way along, and I had no issue with it. When I'm out, when I'm taking picture in nature, I usually use manual focus. And actually Fuji cameras has a very good feature that helps me nailing focus much faster and easier in the landscape. I'm gonna explain in a second. Where the autofocus fails is more when you have many people in the photo. It will have some hard time to pick up the face that needs to be focused on, and sometimes it's focused on people in the background, not the actual subject of the photo. That's the main issue with the autofocus system on Fujifilm cameras, but that's not affecting us as a landscape photographer. The great feature it has is that I assigned focus and back button focus to one of the buttons in the back of my camera, and while I am using the manual focus, I still can use autofocus using that back button. That means I can quickly focus on the subject, then I can nail the focus and make it very precise using the focus ring on the lens. Also, you can set up the camera As soon as you touch the focus ring, the image will be zoomed in 100% to the point that you are focusing on, and then you can see exactly if your focus is correct and accurate or not. So that's the way I've named my focus easily, very quickly, every single time. The next point is actually related to the screen again and the layout of the buttons on the camera. You can customize all the buttons as I mentioned, but you also can customize the screen to have 4 different functions when you swap left, swap right, swap up, or swap down. So every time you swap on the screen in one direction, you can activate one of the settings of the camera. I set up my screen. When I swap left, I can switch between the 2-second timer and 10-second timer or turn off the delay. Swap up, I can bring up the 4-channel histogram very big and I can nail the exposure, or I can swap down to bring up the level and make sure my shot is leveled, or I can swap right to change the dynamic range settings. The next category and next feature on the camera is the quick menu. You can assign different options to the quick menu, different settings, and you can change them directly from there. It's very easy to use. You also can set up different camera settings for different scenarios. For instance, you want the camera to be ready when you see wildlife and you want to react fast. You can pick up one of the custom settings on the camera through the quick menu that has been set for that type of situation. And it's also actually keep the settings separate from videography and photography. Even though this camera is a photocentric camera, but it's a very capable video camera as well. So whenever you switch between video and still photography and you come back, you don't have to change your settings again. Your settings are saved. The next thing is the price, which is very important as well, right? Right now, the time I'm recording this video, the price of the body Fuji XT5 body only is around $1,700, which is a very reasonable price, I would say. But if you are switching to Fuji, you need to buy new lenses as well. And the lenses on Fuji cameras are not so cheap. But you can find second-hand lenses in very good quality and with a very reasonable price. You also have third-party lenses, as I mentioned, which are very, very good price, and they will do a wonderful job for landscape photography. The next section is film simulation on Fuji cameras, especially on Fuji XT5. Because I'm shooting in RAW, I usually don't care about film simulations. But when you take a photo, when you set up a Fuji camera, you always have to pick up one of those film simulations. Even though it doesn't affect the raw file, but when you open it in, for instance, Capture One will automatically apply the same film simulation that has been set in the camera automatically. And you can also change the Capture One behavior. That's also an option. Even though I don't use film simulation, but I have set my camera to shoot in Real Ace. I really love that film simulation because the Real Ace has a very, very natural tonality, very natural colors. It's close to Provia or Standard, which has been previously my go-to film simulation on my previous Fuji XT4. I guess they have introduced Real Ace when they launched Fuji GFX 102 late 23, and then later on with the firmware update they brought it into Fuji XT5. But Fuji XT4 never got this Real Ace simulation, and I was very happy that I switched to XT5 because I could get Real Ace. Fuji XT5 also has a very good IBIS, or in-body image stabilization. For a landscape photographer, it's a very invaluable item or function. Why is that? Because I can shoot in very, very low shutter speeds, like 1/4 of the second, 1/8 of the second. I never got a very good sharp image in half a second, but if you are with sturdy hands and you are not as shaky as I am, you might be able to even get half a second exposure with IBIS of Fuji XT5. I'm very pleased with that. You might have image stabilization on some of the lenses. If you don't have it in your camera, you always want to use a lens that it has image stabilization. If the lens has the image stabilization and the camera has in-body stabilization, they will help each other a little bit and you will get a little bit more stabilized images. It's also great for videography if you are into videography as well. The last category I want to talk about is the battery. The battery of XT5 is good and it's good enough. I can shoot almost a whole day with the single battery on Fuji X-T5. I don't need to change it so often. I think it's very good. But if you shoot 4K videos as well, the battery will drain a bit faster. And it's always a good idea to have extra batteries, especially in a cold environment where I usually go out and it's cold here in Sweden, then the battery might go down faster. But as I said, even in the winter time, I had days that I shoot a whole day without changing the batteries. I don't know exactly how many shots you can get with the single battery, but I shoot a lot. When I am out, I shoot a lot of pictures. That's why sometimes I run out of the battery and I have to change it. If you set the brightness of the screen, it will affect the battery life. If you use IBIS, it will affect the battery life as well. But in general, I think the battery life on Fuji X-T5 is very good. I've been using a Fuji system for about 5 years, and I switched from X-T4 to X-T5 2 years ago, and I'm very happy with this camera. I was using it in rain, in the snow. The camera is weather sealed, which is very important as well for landscape photographers. I even dropped it in water once. I would say it's a very good camera for landscape photography. So this camera, of course, had some pros and some cons, but for landscape photographers, I think it's a great choice. If your goal is to use this camera mainly for astrophotography, I wouldn't recommend it. It's better if you go with the full frame camera. I would perhaps pick up a Sony camera or a Nikon camera. But if you are taking pictures during the day and sunrise, sunset and blue hours, the camera is more than capable. That's it for the camera itself. If you are interested in woodland photography and you are interested in which lens is good for this camera for woodland photography, watch this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you soon again in the next one.